If the Grey Zone is the Camelot of American investigative journalism, Max Blumenthal is our King Arthur. He is author, journalist, and editor at the Grey Zone News and joins us now. Max, let's start, if we may, with the extraordinary Yemen bombers story. I mean, frankly, it was like reading the Boston Marathon bombers. If they'd had a signal channel, it's the kind of ugly war pornography that we might have seen on their messages. It repulsed me, especially when I see the people who were involved, who were supposed to be the alternative to the mass murderers that came before. How did it strike you?
Well, Signalgate, as it's now known, has become the first major scandal of the second term of Donald Trump. But it's not a scandal for the reason which it should be. In official Washington, Signalgate is a scandal over OPSEC, or operational security. It's a scandal over a bumbling cast of characters who denounce DEI, but also support, in the form of Pete Hegseth, DUI. And it's sort of funny. It's like a Marx Brothers sketch. But that's not the scandal here. The scandal is the content of the texts. And the content tells us that they are willfully, deliberately bombing civilian buildings in order to get to assassinate people they don't even know. One referred to by National Security Council Director Mike Waltz as the Houthis' top missile guy who is visiting his girlfriend. There are now scores and scores of civilians dead across Sana'a. We don't even know what the military result is. And this is a war being waged on behalf of Israel to protect Israel's genocidal imperatives in Gaza, to prevent the one force on the planet, Ansar Allah, from being able to pressure Israel into a ceasefire and allowing food and electricity into Gaza as it agreed to. And it's a war being waged on one of the poorest countries on the planet by a gargantuan empire with British assistance. That's the scandal. But in Washington, there's no problem with the war at all for the Democrats or any of Trump's critics. They're just making it a scandal over OPSEC and goofy characters. And it's something that the public is increasingly disinterested in and won't actually harm Trump in the long run. And then there's another issue here, which relates to your monologue about Iran directly. Mike Waltz, the National Security Council Director, is a longtime project of the Israel lobby. He sits firmly in the neoconservative camp, is very fervently pro-Iran war. How did he have Jeffrey Goldberg's phone number? How did Jeffrey Goldberg get let in to this Signal chat? And who is Jeffrey Goldberg? The answer appears to be that Mike Waltz, 2 days before letting Goldberg accidentally into this chat, was seeking to leak to him on behalf of the neocon faction in the Trump administration to try to move the message, which is not just we need to bomb Yemen because the Houthis are terrorists, but we also need to attack Iranian nuclear sites. That's my theory based on solid fact, the solid fact that it was Mike Waltz who reached out to Jeffrey Goldberg. So who's Jeffrey Goldberg? Jeffrey Goldberg is the leading pro-Israel journalist in probably American history. As a young man, he volunteered to serve in the Israeli military as a guard at the concentration camp in the Negev known as Ketziot. He emerged in U.S. media as not just sort of a liberal pro-Israel Zionist, but also as a neocon who was furnishing pro-war propaganda for the Bush administration about Saddam Hussein being tied to Osama bin Laden. Dick Cheney cited it twice during the run-up to the Iraq War. Then he was Benjamin Netanyahu's errand boy during the Obama administration, attempting to convince Obama and America that Israel was going to imminently attack Iran unless the U.S. did it first. This is Netanyahu's agenda, and Goldberg was lying. Now, Goldberg has subsequently told many lies about Donald Trump or published unsourced stories that generated a massive media buzz about Trump calling World War I soldiers losers. He's the editor-in-chief of the Atlantic magazine, probably the worst magazine in America, which is virulently Zionist and anti-Trump. And here's Mike Waltz reaching out to this figure and compromising the security of everyone in the Trump administration. But no one in Washington now is asking why Mike Waltz wanted Jeffrey Goldberg's ear, why he was grooming Jeffrey Goldberg. And it all seems to be about the neocon faction in the Trump administration pushing for war with Iran.
None of this is in America's interests, of course. This is the very opposite of putting America first. This is all being done for Israel. I'm not able to answer the question. Even my own children ask me it, and I have no answer. Why? Why, Max? Why are they doing all this? Why are they bending themselves out of the shape that they at least would like to be seen in? Why do they all, your country and mine, compromise, debase all of the things they say they stand for a tiny little, I'll say it like a French president once did, a shitty little state on the Mediterranean of 7 million people? What is it that's so irresistible about this settler state that we have to do anything and everything to help them?
Well, I should annotate that and say a shitty little genocidal apartheid state 7,000 miles away from where I sit right now is basically occupying this government. And it's all about the Benjamins. We know that. Miriam Adelson, the widow of the late casino baron Sheldon Adelson, is the top donor to Donald Trump, has contributed something like $600 million or more to Donald Trump's elections and various political campaigns. She represents one thing and one thing only: Netanyahu's Israel, the Likud party in Israel. She is an Israeli asset, and she was granted a better seat at Trump's inauguration, directly behind Donald Trump, than every member of Congress who is there and most secretaries in Donald Trump's incoming cabinet. And she is paying for this. The Jerusalem Post recently called Miriam Adelson a modern-day Rothschild who is essentially setting the agenda for Donald Trump. So whether it's kidnapping green card holders, permanent legal residents of the United States off the street on camera with masked Gestapo squads of secret police because they attended one or two anti-Israel Palestine solidarity demos, or bombing Yemen, this is about the U.S. government acting as Israel's agent. Adam Boehler, who was Trump's hostage negotiator trying to get U.S.-Israeli dual nationals out of Gaza, when he declared that we are not Israel's agent in an interview on CNN, he was immediately sidelined. He lost his job because we are Israel's agent. And it doesn't just relate. It's something that I should say, growing up in Washington, being in Washington, I can tell you and all your viewers that in private, people in power in Washington do not love Israel. They don't have this deep, abiding affection for Israel. In fact, they kind of despise Israel, and you can see that in the Signal chat where J.D. Vance says, why are we waging this war when only 3% of U.S. shipping goes through the Red Sea? It's mostly European shipping. He wouldn't say Israel. But another person in the chat who's not very well known, Joe Kent, who is sort of a foreign policy restrainer like J.D. Vance maybe was, working directly under Tulsi Gabbard, said, if we don't attack now, Israel will start to attack Yemen and we will be forced to constantly resupply Israel. Kent is basically saying we don't have any choice. We just have to resupply Israel and back up whatever it does, even though we might not want to. So you can see right there, the vice president and a key intelligence official are acknowledging that this war is not serving the American interest. And I know for a fact that those two figures, and J.D. Vance in particular, strongly oppose a war with Iran and will be able to do nothing to stop the momentum towards that war if Miriam Adelson tells Donald Trump that that is what he has to do to maintain her fortune.
Honestly, it's like episode 4 of The Godfather. It is almost impossible to believe that it's fact and not fiction. But let's move on to the big enchilada, Max. Looking at the tarmac at Diego Garcia, looking at the frankly rather congested waterways of the Persian Gulf, with not one but 2 American aircraft carriers there now, all kinds of battleships deployed there. It's looking, and reading people like Scott Ritter, it's looking like well beyond the 11th hour, and that we may very well be on the brink of the once mythical war with Iran. First of all, tell us how likely that war is, and secondly, what you think the outcome of it will be, the implications of it, the reverberations of it.
Yeah, I really don't want to speculate on how likely it will be, because I can remember discussions in the U.S. going back to 2008 on the imminent war with Iran taking place, and it never happened. So I don't want to get into punditry that embarrasses me later on. But you do have a president here who is waging gunboat diplomacy, appears somewhat crazed, maybe a little bit senile, but more importantly, completely captured by the bomb Iran elements within the U.S. foreign policy establishment. What he's missing is something that George Bush had and relied upon to launch these neoconservative wars after 9/11, which is a base. There's no popular base within MAGA, although you do have a lot of cultists and bootlickers within that movement. You don't feel the same momentum to just take some country, some Muslim country, and smash it against the wall, as Michael Ledeen once called for doing. The Ledeen doctrine would be a tough sell for Trump's base, especially if there's a huge economic price, but he might do it. The cost would be obviously more severe than attacking Iraq, a country with a much weaker, less technologically sophisticated military and smaller population and less popular support for its leader. I believe within the Trump administration, there's a belief that a determined attack, including with tactical nuclear weapons on Iran and Iranian nuclear sites, could lead to regime change in Iran, which is extremely dangerous. And they're being told that by a lot of the CIA-backed Iranian dissidents in their ear. And what Iran is planning to do in response, they've sort of put on the table pretty openly. Press TV, the Iranian state-backed broadcaster, has published a list of potential Iranian targets across the region. One of them is the Diego Garcia Air Base. But there are all sorts of U.S. air bases within the range of Iranian ballistic missiles and drones, and including bases all across Iraq, which could also be attacked by popular mobilization forces. This would be damaging to the U.S. military for certain. If we look at the attack on the al-Assad base in Iraq in 2018. But what doesn't seem clear to me is the decision-making within Iran. That's something I don't understand well enough. You have a reformist president, Mahmoud Pezeshkian, in power. I got to meet him briefly in New York at the UN General Assembly last year with his strategic affairs minister, basically his main advisor, Javad Zarif. And they were pushing peace. They were seeking a nuclear deal. That was at the top of their agenda, and they had been granted the latitude to make that trip to New York by the leader, the supreme leader of Iran and presumably the IRGC. They came back and they were subjected to harsh attacks by the principalist faction, which believes that the only way, possibly correctly, the only way for Iran to protect its strategic deterrence is through a real nuclear program. And they've been weakened ever since. And the deal that Donald Trump seems to be offering, as you said, George, earlier, is capitulation to Israel, disarming its forces, giving up its cards out in its near abroad, like the popular mobilization units, giving up its ballistic missile program, and then the U.S. will move in and destroy what's left. That's for certain. So if Donald Trump doesn't put up something to give the reformist forces cover to make a deal domestically, I think we're careening towards some kind of conflict, but it could just be an escalation of the kind of conflict we've been seeing of assassinations and attacks on shipping. I'm not qualified to make a prediction.
Finally, you talked earlier, you alluded earlier, let's put some flesh on it, to the kidnapping. I mean, I just watched it before we came on air. The kidnapping of a young woman with a green card, perfectly legitimately in the United States, and having a green card entitled to, albeit limited, First Amendment protection under US law. She was literally kidnapped in broad daylight on the street by masked men and women because, as it turned out, as you said, she had attended some pro-Palestinian rallies. I wasn't sure what I was looking at. I didn't know if this was a death squad, and I'm sure she didn't either. I didn't know if these were Israeli agents that were kidnapping this woman. They turn out to be agents of the United States government. And then I read this unhinged statement by Robert Kennedy about Columbia University, and I got to thinking sympathetically for you and Anya and everyone like you in the US. This situation is becoming dark and dangerous in the United States. Tell us how it looks to you.
It is a dark and dangerous situation because they're normalizing the criminalization of certain forms of speech that offend and disrupt the objectives of a foreign criminal apartheid state that has captured the US government. And so those of us who are considered to be disruptors, like me, are being targeted. I mean, I wasn't picked up by black masked Israeli censorship enforcers or ICE, as it's known here in the US, as Runesa Öztürk, this Turkish student at Tufts University, was on her way to an iftar dinner in the streets of Boston simply because she spoke out against Israel. But I was held at Dulles International Airport, returning from a vacation with my family last month, and questioned by a Customs and Border Protection officer days before Mahmoud Khalil was kidnapped and jailed thousands of miles from where he was living in New York. This is the Columbia University Palestine Solidarity activist. And I was asked questions about these very same figures who appear to be Palestine Solidarity activists who are citizens, as well as those who are not. And I didn't know what it was about at the time. I didn't know what the names signified that I was being asked about. But the dragnet is widening. It is a very dark time, as we've seen, and it's affecting major institutions across the country, like Columbia University, where the Trump administration came in and said, we're going to suspend $400 million in federal grants to you as a research institution, which means you will become toothless and worthless unless you do what Israel wants, and your South Asian and Middle East Studies Department comes under the guidance and scrutiny of basically a pro-Israel administrator, that you ban masks on campus so that students can easily be identified and have their faces and identifications sent to the federal authorities if they protest, and so on. And Columbia immediately buckled, and they're going from campus to campus doing this. So it's a dark time. This is the worst attack on free speech in the United States since the McCarthy era, and it's all being done to protect the genocidal imperatives of a foreign state. And the outrage is just, it doesn't match the moment from what I'm seeing, because liberals, while they may want to support free speech principles or the First Amendment, have, first of all, whittled away at the First Amendment with their own censorious campaigns during the Trump era. And number two, they don't stand with the students on principle because many of them are uncomfortable opposing Israel. So the attack continues. And what I see in the UK is equally dark under the National Security Act, all these new national security laws, which have been used to hound my colleagues like Richard Medhurst because he was accused of praising Hamas. I mean, this is all about criminalizing anyone speaking out for Palestine, and it's only going to intensify unless the outrage and activism actually meets the moment.